Howdy, hey, I'm Jed, and this is Prez. Hey everybody, we're coming back with episode 7. More presidents to be ranked, more facts to be told. Buckle up, get ready for an amazing episode of Prez. First up is James K. Polk. He was our 11th president. He was a Democrat, and he was president from 1845 to 1849. James K. Polk was known as Young Hickory. In my last video, I talked about Andrew Jackson, who was known as Old Hickory. James K. Polk was kind of his protege, who took the helm of president after Andrew Jackson a little bit down the line. James K. Polk did everything he set out to do in his campaign. He set out to stimulate the economy and start a national bank that will keep that'll keep America's money safe from people losing it unlawfully. He also wanted to spread America's land, and he wanted to enlarge our borders. He was prompted by manifest destiny, which meant that America had the right to explore all of their land and to make sure that they could grow and nourish. Even though these things were really, really good and needed to be done, James K. Polk kind of took manifest destiny to the next level, and it was a little bit of a harsh bully towards Mexico in terms of getting more land. James K. Polk came right after John Tyler. And remember when I was talking about him being a rebel and annexing Texas? Well, we had annexed Texas and we had Texas land, but we weren't sure where that ended. We knew where it started, but we weren't sure where they ended. Mexico claimed some land, and the United States claimed some land. And James K. Polk, you know how James K. Polk is about getting more land. Well, he told U.S. soldiers to tease Mexican soldiers into a war. So he was he wasn't doing this the right way. He was going in like, hey, get them to start it by getting on their land. And really, it was good that we got Texas, and good that we got all that land in that war, which we eventually won. But the thing was, we got maybe too much, because we got over half of what Mexico's territory was. And now we had all this land, and it was good that we have it now, but the way that we got it is a little less than stellar. And while this was bad, we cannot take away of how good us getting that land was. He was only our 11th president, which, putting that into context, we're still a very young nation. We're still getting right off the ground, and us getting that land really helped us grow. And even though it's not the best way to get it, I always give bonus points for presidents who win wars. And even though it wasn't great that the war had started in the first place, James K. Polk gave us steady leadership and an adamant person to turn to in wartime. Another good thing about his short one-term presidency was the economy. The economy was in good condition when James K. Polk took over, because we were still trying to get back after that depression during Martin Van Buren's presidency. And the national bank that he set up really stabilized the economy and the United States as a whole. So he was a good president, even if some of his tactics for getting America larger were questionable. Next up is Benjamin Harrison, our 23rd president. He was a Republican, and he was president from 1889 to 1893. Benjamin Harrison was that little sandwich in between the two Grover Clevelands. It's kind of a shame. I kind of wish he was reelected, because he did a better job than Grover Cleveland. Like many of his other bearded counterparts, these middle ground presidents were high on reform, but I think Benjamin Harrison took it above and beyond. He did work for reform, and even though he didn't do as much reform as some other presidents, he still fought for it and broke up many monopolies and trusts, just like William Howard Taft, who fought corruption in banks and stocks and whatnot. But he did more than that. He opened Ellis Island, which was huge and monumental, considering that beforehand, America was very racist about immigration and only letting in so many people, and it was completely based on color and racism. It was very bad. But when Ellis Island opened up, Benjamin Harrison was telling the world that America was more open to people coming in than it was once before. Another monumental achievement of the Benjamin Harrison administration was he added more states to the Union than any other president. And he did all this in just one term. The last good thing during the Harrison administration is kind of one-sided, and you can decide for yourself whether you agree with this or not. The tariffs were much more were much more debated, let's say, back during Harrison's term than they are now. Basically, a tariff is how much imports are taxed. High tariffs support industry and the northeast side of the United States, because the tariffs are taxing. The tariffs tax the boat companies that send, the goods out, and because of that, people are able to make more money off of the goods shipped. The South didn't really like tariffs because tariffs, when they higher tariffs, means that the imports cost more, so less of the profit made by the farmers when selling their crops, they get less profit because more of it is eaten up by tariffs, money going towards tariffs. But we really needed high tariffs during this time, I think, because we were entering the Industrial Revolution, and there were more and more factories popping up all over the United States. And with more factories, more exporting and importing, which means we really wanted tariffs at this point because it means we made the most for our buck. Ellis Island raising tariffs and adding more states all sound great, and they all are great accomplishments. But they were easier to make, and they were smaller considering some of the other accomplishments that we'll get to later. This was a good president. Benjamin Harrison was a good president, but he was more down to earth and boring, middle, because while he did do a lot of good things, there were so many great things that other presidents later on will do that are, groundbreaking. Next up is Chester A. Arthur. He was our 21st president. He was Republican. He was president from 1881 to 1885. This one is by far the best dressed and the best facial hair of any president ever. Just look at it. Oh man, look at it. All right. Let's stop with the shenanigans and get down to business. Chester A. Arthur took over the presidency right after James A. Garfield's untimely demise. Like I said, and James Garfield's death really stimulated and pushed for reform and ended the spoils system. And Chester A. Arthur pushed that through. Really, it was amazing feat how much legislation he was able to get through, because he was helped by James A. Garfield dying, but it was still a feat how much good he was able to do and how much reform he was able to put into the government. But people didn't know he would act this way towards the spoils system, where you get high places if you do what people want. Actually, Chester A. Arthur got to where he was because of the spoils system and because he supported different Republican candidates. So everybody was scared because everybody knew this. So when he took the helm as president, people were like, oh, great, more spoils system. But he totally surprised everybody and was really the defining reformer of that time. But there are more less famous but just as important accomplishments that he made. One of which was the Red Cross. He was the president. James A. Garfield, he showed some interest in the Red Cross when he first heard about it, but Chester A. Arthur was the president who pushed for it and got the U.S. in that, treaty, you might say. Another huge monumental thing, which is almost rivals the spoils system being destroyed, was the building of the U.S. Navy. Now, he was still soon after the Civil War. He actually served in the Civil War. And during the Civil War, a huge part was the Navy was completely changed from large, you could think of like a pirate ship, to the metal-clad, iron-clad boats. And they were kind of ramshackle and put together as fast as we could. We didn't really have like a lot of them, and they were mostly blown apart. And he said, what if another war breaks out? We need to be strong and stay strong. So he built a new U.S. Navy full of these ironclad, strong ships, and that's a huge accomplishment. And it took a lot of money, and it took a lot of expertise knowing just how to do it. So Chester A. Arthur did a lot of good things for this country, but he was still one of those middle of the line, like bearded, boring ones, you might say. But even still, he did a lot of good for this country. And, look at those mutton chops. Next up was William McKinley, our 25th president. He was a Republican, and he was president from 1897 to 1901. I think, in my opinion, William McKinley is the nicest president we've ever had. He's so sweet. I mean, every day at 6 o'clock, when he was governor of Ohio, on 6 o'clock, he'd look out his window to his wife, and he'd wave to her, and she'd wave back, because their house was across the street. Every day at 6 o'clock. every day up. And like when he would be meeting with dignitaries in meetings and stuff, he would like give little children autographs and like stop talking to the foreign dignitary. It's like, okay, he was a really nice guy, but when it came to war, he cracked down and meant business. Remember Cuba from JFK? Well, it wasn't always on its own. In fact, it used to be owned by Spain. And Cuba wanted its independence, and they were going to fight Spain for it. And because of the Monroe Doctrine, we'll tell you about that when we get to James Monroe, William McKinley knew that he had to free Cuba from Spain. And so America, not going into war at first, though, they went to talk to Spain about it. But while they were talking with Spain, the ship that took the people who were talking to Spain there exploded mysteriously. He knew what he had to do, and he did it right. He sent in troops to free Cuba from Spanish rule, and he always said, I don't want war to happen. I want every precaution to be taken for us not to go to war. If we're going to go to war, we're going to kick the crap out of those guys and make sure we win. And win we did. William McKinley really got down to business, though. He had an entire telephone room dedicated to this. He had telephones everywhere and maps so his generals could call him whenever he needed. He could talk about strategies and whatnot. He installed a press room so that the press could know about this war. He did everything right, and we won. We won eventually, and Cuba won its independence. So William McKinley won a war. Like I said, you win a war, you get bonus points. William McKinley, though, was sadly assassinated while attending a Pan American convention, and that hit me here, because he would have been able to do so much more if he wouldn't have been killed. One last tidbit about William McKinley, though. A lot of people focus on his Spanish-American War victories, as they should, but he was also the president who annexed Hawaii and made it an American territory. It would later become a state under Dwight D. Eisenhower. You'll notice that I said Federalist, and that one might be new to you, because we've never had a Federalist president on the show yet. Well, we've only had two Federalist presidents, George Washington and John Adams. And George Washington, we'll get to his feelings about parties later on, so you can really just count John Adams as a Federalist. The Federalist Party died very soon after John Adams' presidency, as soon as the Democratic Republicans took power. Mainly what you need to know about them is they were more into a central government rather than states' rights. John Adams helped build this country from the ground up as a founding father, and that aided him well in becoming president. Even though his presidency was a little uneventful, he was a president who was really big on helping to get better relations with other countries. He served as ministers to other countries under other presidents as well. But much like his son, he was stubborn and would not compromise on many issues that needed to be compromised with. Added on top of it that his party was losing control of everything and wasn't able to make many decisions, his presidency was very boring. But you might say, why is he ranked so high if he's so boring? He was a genius, and the relations he built with other countries and the way he stabilized this country as a whole cannot be taken lightly. This founding father helped build this country, and while he didn't do things to the country, you might say, during his presidency, he helped make the country. Thanks for watching episode 7. Stay tuned and stay ready for more episodes, because they're on the way. We got more presidents to rank. It's going to be a lot of fun. Make sure to subscribe, like, comment, and tell all your friends about Prez.